In 1907, a young chemist in Paris was working on something incredibly simple. No investors, no big company, no global ambition, just a small formula for a hair dye. At that time, hair coloring products were unreliable, sometimes even dangerous. People used them anyway, because they had no better option. But this chemist saw something different, not a product, but a problem. And instead of accepting the way things were, he decided to change them. He created something safer, more controlled, more scientific, and slowly that one product began to spread, from a few local salons to entire cities, then countries, and before anyone even noticed, this small experiment had turned into something much bigger. A system that didn't just sell beauty products, but started shaping how the world defines beauty itself. From everyday shampoo to luxury skincare to medical-grade cosmetics, the same company was now everywhere, quietly expanding, quietly dominating. Until one day, that small formula from 1907 became the foundation of one of the most powerful consumer empires in the world. L'Oreal, and the man behind it was Eugène Schuller. Everything started in 1881, when Eugène Schuller was born in Paris. He wasn't born into wealth or power, but into a small working-class family where his parents ran a pastry shop. There were no business schools, no corporate systems, and no structured training, just a simple shop and real customers. But in that environment, without even realizing it, he began learning something most companies still struggle to understand: how people think and why they buy. As he grew up during the 1890s, this everyday exposure quietly shaped his mindset. There were no big theories or grand ambitions at this stage, just observation. Watching people, understanding behavior, and noticing small patterns slowly built a powerful realization in his mind. People don't buy products, they buy solutions to their problems. Then came the turning point. In 1900, he stepped into the world of science by joining the Institute of Applied Chemistry in Paris. This was where instinct met precision. Over the next 4 years, from 1900 to 1904, he immersed himself in chemistry, studying deeply, experimenting constantly, and beginning to think like a scientist. By 1904, he graduated, now carrying a rare combination of scientific knowledge and real-world understanding. But he didn't stop there. Instead of choosing a comfortable path, he moved into laboratories, working as a lab assistant and gaining hands-on experience. Between 1904 and 1906, he tested ideas again and again, learning a crucial lesson that would define his future. Theory alone doesn't create products. Real solutions require precision, testing, and constant refinement. Then around 1906, he noticed something that others had ignored. Hair coloring had already become popular, but the products available in the market were unstable, unreliable, and sometimes even dangerous. Yet people kept using them, not because they were good, but because there was no better option. Where others saw a normal product, he saw a problem, a broken system, a gap waiting to be solved. So instead of selling what already existed, he decided to fix it. He began experimenting intensely, mixing chemicals, testing formulas, failing repeatedly, and trying again. There was no company, no funding, and no guarantee of success. Just one clear goal: to make it better. And finally, in 1907, he succeeded. He developed a hair dye that was safer, more controlled, and more scientific than anything available at the time. This wasn't just another product, it was a solution. And in that moment, without a brand, without a company, and without a global vision, something far more powerful had already been created. A system, a way of thinking, a model that would soon grow into one of the biggest beauty companies in the world, L'Oreal. By 1909, the experiment was no longer just an idea. It had become a business. This was the year when the young chemist who had developed a safer hair dye finally took the next step and formally founded his company. Its original name was long and technical: Société Française des Teintures Inoffensives pour Cheveux. In simple words, the French company of safe hair dyes. That name may have sounded scientific, but the vision behind it was very clear. He was not trying to sell fashion alone. He was trying to build a business where beauty would be driven by chemistry, research, and trust. The first product behind this company was the hair dye formula he had already developed, a product associated with the name L'Oreal. And this name would later inspire the identity of the company itself. So if the question is simple, who started L'Oreal, when, and how, the answer is also simple. It was started by Eugène Schuler in 1909 after creating a safer hair dye and selling it to professional hairdressers. That was the real beginning, not of a giant empire yet, but of a system that could grow. What made this stage important was not just the company's creation, but the way it was built. This was not a business launched through large factories, huge capital, or global investors. It began with a specialist product aimed at professionals, backed by scientific credibility. In the beginning, the focus was narrow, but the thinking behind it was already much bigger. Schuler understood something many founders fail to understand. A good product is only the first step. If you want to build a real company, the product must reach the market, win trust, and create repeat demand. That is why, during the 1910s and 1920s, he did not keep the business limited to a small local operation. He began expanding its reach and building a broader commercial structure. He developed a network of sales representatives and started targeting markets beyond a single city or salon circle. This mattered because he was no longer thinking like a chemist who had invented something useful. He was now thinking like a founder who wanted scale. He understood that if beauty products were going to become a real industry, distribution would matter just as much as innovation. Over time, this strategy began to transform the company. It slowly moved from being just a supplier of hair dye to becoming a broader beauty business. And then came the breakthrough years that proved this company was not going to remain trapped in one category forever. In 1934, Schuler launched the first soap-free shampoo. This was an important move because it showed the company was expanding beyond hair color and entering everyday hair care. Then in 1935, the company launched Ambre Solaire, a sun protection oil that was far ahead of its time and showed that Schuler was already thinking beyond salons and into wider consumer habits. These launches were not random, they revealed a pattern. First, enter the market with one strong solution, then expand into nearby categories, then build consumer trust across multiple needs. That is exactly how small product companies turn into major brands. And Schuler was doing this decades before modern consumer giants made it famous. Then came 1939, a major symbolic and strategic turning point. This was the year the company officially adopted the name L'Oreal. It also moved to 14 Rue Royale in Paris, giving the business a more defined identity and presence. By this point, the transformation was clear. What had started in 1909 as a technical company selling safe hair dye was no longer just a niche scientific business. It had become a growing beauty brand with a stronger name, a broader product base, and a much bigger future ahead of it. So between 1909 and 1939, the real foundation of L'Oreal was built. 1909 gave the company its birth. The 1910s and 1920s gave it distribution and reach. 1934 and 1935 gave it expansion beyond hair dye. And 1939 gave it the name and identity that the world would eventually recognize. This was the period when a single formula turned into a company, and that company began turning into a brand. In 1957, everything could have collapsed. The man who had built the foundation of the company, Eugène Schuler, passed away. This is usually the moment where founder-led companies begin to lose direction. When the founder is gone, the vision often fades, growth slows down, and the company gradually weakens. But this story did not follow that path. By 1957, the company had already evolved beyond a single individual. It was no longer dependent on one man, it had developed something far more powerful, a system. After Schuler's death, leadership passed to François Dalle, and this is where the real transformation began. From 1957 to 1983, under Dalle's leadership, the company didn't just survive, it expanded. The first major turning point came in 1963, when the company went public. This decision changed everything. It opened access to capital, allowed larger-scale operations, and set the foundation for global ambition. The company was no longer operating as a limited private business, it was now positioned to grow internationally. With this shift, a clear strategy began to take shape. Instead of relying on a single product category, the company started acquiring brands, carefully and strategically. It brought in names like Lancôme, Garnier, Biotherm. Each acquisition added a new dimension: luxury, mass market, and skincare. Slowly, the company moved beyond its origins in hair products and began transforming into a multi-category beauty business. But expansion alone was not enough. Because in the beauty industry, products don't sell on performance alone, they sell on perception. And this is where L'Oreal made one of its most powerful moves. It mastered marketing. The company didn't just sell cosmetics, it sold identity. Through advertising, branding, and celebrity influence, it built a connection with consumers that went far beyond the product itself. Campaigns were designed not just to promote products, but to create aspiration. One of the most iconic examples of this approach was the slogan, "Because you're worth it." This single line changed the way beauty products were marketed. Instead of telling customers what to buy, it made them feel why they deserved it. And that psychological shift became one of L'Oreal's biggest advantages. While competitors focused on features and pricing, L'Oreal focused on perception, confidence, and personal value. This strategy was amplified through global ambassadors, actors, models, and public figures who represented different cultures and markets. From luxury branding to mass market appeal, L'Oreal ensured that its products were not just visible, but desirable. This was not random marketing. It was a system carefully designed to dominate attention across every segment of the beauty industry. As the company moved into the 1980s, another shift began. Under leadership figures like Charles Zviak, the focus on scientific research became even stronger. By this point, one key understanding had emerged. Beauty alone was not enough. Science was what built long-term trust. This thinking led to important strategic moves. In 1984, the company secured the Ralph Lauren fragrance license, marking its entry into global lifestyle branding. This was no longer just about products. It was about identity, positioning, and influence. But the most aggressive phase of growth came under Lindsay Owen Jones. From the late 1980s into the early 2000s, the company didn't just expand, it dominated. Brand after brand was added to its portfolio, including Maybelline, Kiehl's, La Roche-Posay, SkinCeuticals, Helena Rubinstein, and Armani fragrances. Each brand targeted a specific segment: luxury, pharmacy, skincare, and mass-market cosmetics, allowing the company to cover the entire beauty spectrum. This was the real strategy. While most competitors focused on dominating a single category, L'Oreal entered all of them. It built a presence across every major segment of the beauty industry. By the early 2000s, the transformation was complete. What had started as a small scientific hair dye business in 1909 had evolved into the world's leading cosmetics company. This success was not driven by luck, but by a system built over decades, combining science, branding, marketing, acquisitions, and global scale. And at this point, L'Oreal was no longer just a company. It had become a global beauty ecosystem. By 2006, L'Oreal had already become the world's leading beauty company. The battles of survival and expansion were over. The company had scale, global reach, and a powerful portfolio across multiple segments. But the next challenge was far more complex, staying relevant in a world that was evolving faster than ever. That same year, Jean-Paul Agon became CEO, marking the beginning of a new phase focused not just on growth, but on reinvention. Between 2006 and 2011, this reinvention was built step by step. The company expanded aggressively into emerging markets such as Asia, Latin America, and Eastern Europe, where rising middle classes were creating new demand. At the same time, L'Oreal strengthened its global positioning, making its brands adaptable across cultures, income levels, and consumer preferences. Internally, the company focused on improving distribution networks, supply chains, and market penetration, ensuring that its products were not just innovative, but accessible at scale. This was also the period where the early foundations of sustainability and ethical sourcing were quietly established, which later became central to its global image. However, as these promises grew stronger, so did scrutiny around whether marketing claims and real practices were always aligned. But this was not a stable environment. Competition was intensifying across every level of the industry. In luxury beauty, Estée Lauder continued strengthening its premium dominance. In mass-market products, Procter & Gamble and Unilever controlled global retail shelves. Instead of choosing one battlefield, L'Oreal made a critical decision: it would compete across all of them at the same time. Luxury, mass market, and dermatological skincare were no longer separate strategies. They became one integrated system. By 2011, this approach had started to deliver results. Jean-Paul Agon took on the additional role of chairman, consolidating leadership and aligning long-term strategy with execution. This ensured stability at the top while enabling faster decision-making in a highly competitive global market. A major structural shift followed in 2014, when L'Oreal executed a strategic transaction with Nestlé. This move reshaped the ownership structure by reducing Nestlé's stake and strengthening the influence of the Bettencourt-Meyers family. It was not just a financial adjustment, it reinforced long-term control and ensured that strategic direction remained stable despite global expansion. From 2016 to 2018, the company entered a new phase of targeted expansion into high-growth categories. In 2016, it acquired IT Cosmetics.
IT Cosmetics to do. The former news anchor launched the brand out of her apartment in 2008. Just 8 years later, she sold it to L'Oreal for $1.2 billion.
Strengthening its position in premium beauty in the United States. In 2017, it added brands like CeraVe, Acne-Free, and Ambi, expanding deeply into dermatological skincare, one of the fastest-growing segments globally. However, this same category also brought increasing scrutiny. In later years, lawsuits related to hair relaxer products raised questions about long-term health risks, highlighting the tension between scientific positioning and consumer safety concerns.
Well, happening this morning, cosmetic giant L'Oreal is being sued. The lawsuit claims the company's hair relaxer caused uterine cancer in women. Dana Rebeck has details.
In 2018, L'Oreal made a major strategic leap by acquiring Modiface, entering the world of augmented reality and AI-driven beauty technology. This was not just an acquisition, it was a signal. Beauty was no longer just about products on shelves. It was becoming digital, personalized, and data-driven. L'Oreal was now competing not only with traditional beauty companies, but also in a space influenced by technology platforms and digital ecosystems. By 2020, the transformation was clearly visible. L'Oreal was no longer just protecting its leadership, it was redesigning itself for the future, strengthening its presence in key markets like Asia, and expanding further into skincare and high-growth categories. And then came the leadership transition. In 2021, Nicolas Hieronimus became CEO, while Jean-Paul Agon moved into the role of chairman. This ensured continuity at the top while introducing a new phase of operational leadership. After 2021, the leadership had changed, but the system remained the same.
L'Oreal has been keeping faces fresh for more than a century. Now it's time for a fresh face at the top. Hieronimus, having spent his entire career with the French firm, working across all countries and categories, the 57-year-old is steeped in L'Oreal's history and tradition. But his business practices presenting new challenges for the modern chief executive.
The company entered a phase of acceleration. By 2022 and 2023, this strategy became clearly visible as L'Oreal pushed aggressively into premium and luxury segments. One of the most important moves came in 2023, when it acquired the Australian luxury skincare brand Aesop.
Stories is the skincare company Aesop, founded in Melbourne, and it's now been sold to L'Oreal in a deal worth $3.7 billion.
This was not just another acquisition, it was a strategic signal that the company was focusing on high-margin, brand-driven luxury markets. At the same time, the company expanded its beauty tech capabilities. Digital tools, virtual try-ons, and AI-driven personalization were no longer experimental, they had become central to how products were marketed, sold, and experienced. But this shift also exposed deeper issues. Reports highlighting concerns about labor practices in supply chains, including cases linked to jasmine sourcing, raised serious questions about how ethical large-scale global operations truly were. By 2024, L'Oreal continued strengthening its luxury positioning through expansions and partnerships with high-end fashion brands like Miu Miu, while maintaining a strong focus on sustainability and innovation. And by 2025, the company had evolved into a fully integrated global system, dominating across luxury, mass market, dermatology, and technology, all at the same time. But this is where the story becomes more complex. Because while L'Oreal was expanding across every segment, it was also facing questions across every level. From marketing claims to product safety to supply chain ethics, the same system that built its dominance was now being examined more closely than ever before. And that's what makes this story different. Most companies grow, reach a peak, and then slowly begin to decline. They follow trends, react to changes, and struggle to keep up with new competition. But L'Oreal followed a very different path. Instead of reacting to the market, it learned how to move ahead of it. It didn't just grow with time, it adapted before change could force it to. From a small laboratory experiment in 1907 to a company in 1909 to decades of global expansion, this was never a single success story. It was a chain of decisions, each step built on the previous one. Each phase strengthened the system. Over time, that system became powerful enough to operate across multiple segments: luxury, mass market, dermatology, and now even technology. Even today, the structure remains the same. Professional leadership continues to run the company at the top, while strong ownership ensures long-term control behind the scenes. At the same time, the strategy keeps evolving faster than the market itself. This balance between stability and change is what allows the company to stay ahead, even in an industry that is constantly shifting. That is why, even after more than 100 years, L'Oreal is not just surviving, it is still leading. Because in the end, this was never just a beauty company. It was a system built on understanding people, solving real problems, and continuously adapting to new realities. And maybe that is the real reason why, from everyday products to luxury brands to future technologies, the same company keeps appearing again and again. Because it didn't just build products, it built control, and that control started with one simple idea: to make something better.